Welcome back, and thank you for subscribing to Broker Talk, our weekly show about the real estate industry. I'm your host, Larry Lawfer, and I bring you a subject matter expert guest each week who shares their best practices on how to be successful with your purchase and or sale. If you think all agents are the same, you're just wrong. The industry, like most industries, follows the 80-20 rule. 20% of the agents are good and involved in 80% of the transactions. Not all agents are the same. My guest today is a Maine luxury property expert. Her background starts in systems engineering. She evolved through Silicon Valley Consulting, still working in techs, but now creating strategic alliances and partnership agreements with high net worth individuals. Charlene's unique background makes her a go to person for luxury in Maine. I'm happy to bring in Charlene Hamiwka. Am I pronouncing that late? Hamiwka?
No, I didn't tell you how to pronounce it.
Yeah, and I didn't think to ask with his embarrassing, but I can say Harcourt's luxury water. I can't even say that. What's it's a
Well,
great.
the first thing is let's get the last name out of the way because it looks a lot more intimidating than it is.
Yeah.
So the last name is pronounced Hamiwka. The MIW in the middle is like mew of a cat.
Oh,
So
okay.
Hamiwka. It's Ukrainian,
Okay.
but I've heard every variation of that name, as you can imagine.
Yeah, yeah. And we really, when we were talking earlier, we should have done it. But first question I really wanted to ask you is, how is the market in Maine right now?
Well, the market, in a word, is unbelievable. We're seeing a market that I have never seen before in Maine. And just to give you an idea, in the last, I think a lot of it's been brought out by the pandemic, but the last 4 years, in 2018, our median selling price in Maine was about 215,000. At the end of 2021, our last full year, that median price point had jumped up to 300,000. So it's the
Okay.
biggest jump that I've seen since I've been in real estate.
Yeah, and it's happened across the country, but in a similar way. I did the percentages, and the percentage in Maine was like the percentage in the United States. Prices went up, but
Yes, they went up a lot. And
but
in the luxury market,
yeah,
um, we we also saw a corresponding jump. Not as much of a jump because your price points are higher to begin with, so you don't see the big
yeah,
percentages. But in terms of volume, um, across the board, if we look at starting at the 1 million mark and going in bands like 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, across the board, the sales of those properties have doubled pretty much
wow,
since 2019, right before the
wow,
pandemic,
wow.
to the end of 2021. So we're seeing a huge influx at the high end in terms of the number of properties purchased.
It's just incredible how it's been. There's been discussion about it being a bubble. I don't see that happening. I do see interest rates coming down. No, I'm sorry, going up over the next year, probably twice. Probably quarter basis point is what I understand from some of the other subject matter expertise that people have had on. But prices are still going to rise, even though interest rates will go up and your buying power will be down a little bit.
I
Uh,
had an interesting conversation just on that point, Larry. I had an interesting conversation with an appraiser the other day. We were appraising a high end waterfront property, and the appraiser said to me, they have a model that they run for pricing. And he said, if 2009, 2010 hadn't happened, prices today would be where they should have been if it just went in its normal
right,
um, pace. So, really, houses are not overvalued. They've just kind of caught up to where they should have been all along.
right, right. But if you think about it, the other part of that, Charlene, was when I was growing up, back when the earth was cooling, you were spending about a third of your income for living. Now
Mhm.
it's moved up to almost half of your income because things are so expensive. In the other side, I tell my purchasers that it's kind of a forced savings program because when you have time to take that equity or need that equity, it's going to be there.
Right, right. And while the prices have gone up, I mean, I think the cost of living does depend a lot upon where you are.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think a lot of buyers have found with Maine is that their purchasing power goes a lot farther.
Yeah. Oh, it absolutely would. But luxury is certainly luxury there. Maine is a state like some of the other states where you have a big rural population.
Right.
So there's not like one, like my town of Newton. The average price point is in one of the there's 13 villages in Newton, so it's a fairly big spot. One of the villages is 2.2 million. That's the average price. So
Hmm.
that just isn't so at 300 or 350. I understand nationally it's something like 379 or somewhere in that realm.
Yep.
Um, but luxury is a different animal. So talk about, I mean, you're not going to one town, although there's a couple of towns and there's certainly three counties that you're
Hmm.
paying attention to in Maine. But Bar Harbor, what's the one? Harwich, the one that the President Bush lived in.
Oh, Kennebunkport. So that's, yeah,
Kennebunkport,
that's
yeah,
southern part of the Maine. Southern part of Maine tends to have a little bit higher prices because it's closer to a larger
right,
population area, Austin.
right.
So, but the thing that's kind of unique about Maine, and you just started to allude to that, is that Maine is a very rural state. It's a very large state. We're the largest New England state. We're like half of the landmass of New England. So we're the northernmost, the easternmost, and the largest state. We have a very low population density. There's only like 1.3 million in the whole state. And
It's
most of those are in the southern part too. So
it's.
it's a,
I wanted to say it's darn cold. That's why you have to
it,
be. But one of the really amazing, beautiful aspects of Maine is their coastline, and you have
yes,
like 35 miles of
30,
coastline.
we have 3,500 miles of coastline. So we have the largest amount of coastline of any state in the union. And a lot of that's due to our jagged and very rocky coast.
Yeah.
So that counts all of our tidal um, coastline. We also have, you know, thousands of lakes and forests and mountains. So, Maine has the tagline of vacation land because there's so much to do
Yeah.
year round. I mean, we even
Yeah.
have skiing. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to do here. And it's one of the things that I think attracts a lot of people to Maine. Although when you mention Maine, most people think of lobsters, which are great, by the way, lighthouses and blueberries. I mean, those are kind of like Maine's three big things.
Wait a minute. There's another one. Whoopie pies.
But yes, although there's a fight between, I think it's Massachusetts and Maine,
No,
or
no, it's Pennsylvania. It's yeah, it's
Pennsylvania and Maine,
yeah,
who
yeah,
actually invented
yeah.
the whoopie pie. So we're claiming it. Um, but yeah, but those are our big items, and
It's a
obviously
it's a lot of sugar, is what a whoopie pie is.
it is, and there's lots of recipes too. So
I think Massachusetts it has Parker House rolls and Fluffernutter, a peanut butter and fluff
my
sandwich.
favorite.
Chocolate chip cookies, I think, are also a Massachusetts thing. But anyway, we're well off the topic here of luxury properties. Tell me, how do you differentiate luxury? Are we talking Gaggenau stove versus zero
Sub-zero appliances
sub-zero
and
appliances? What are the differences between one luxury property and another?
so a couple things come down to well, the first thing comes down to in the price point. When I look at a luxury property, they tend to be distinctive and unique, at least the ones that I focus on. And that typically has a much higher than average selling price than the general area.
Right.
And the things that contribute to that, things that make up a luxury property, clearly, being on the ocean is
Yeah.
is one big factor, right?
Yeah.
Waterfront is a big factor.
Yeah.
Um, that puts it into that category, not as much as the fit and finish that you would think, although a lot of the very high end properties do have Sub-Zero appliances or Viking or elevators, but the more important item seems to be the location in terms of, are they on the ocean? That's probably the number one item that really puts it into a luxury category from a price standpoint. Deep water frontage is definitely more valuable than title. And in fact, we've got so many lakes. There are several lakes that are extremely desirable, and prices on those lakes are very close to oceanfront because of the desirability.
Wow.
So, yeah. So those are things that, the first thing I look at when I look at a property is, so what's the location? What kind of waterfront do they have? The other thing that will elevate this into a more of a luxury property is the amount of land and the views. Now, they still have to be well done. I mean, I don't want anybody to think, well, I'm going to have a shack on the ocean and it's going to be a luxury property. It doesn't work that way. But we do see a very high demand at the high end for large tracts of land, farmland, equestrian farms. And especially, I had one equestrian farm sitting on 100+ acres.
Wow.
Out in the middle of nowhere, but it was sitting on a mountaintop and had these tremendous views of the mountain ranges, right?
Yeah.
So, and of course, that house was done extremely well inside with
Sure.
high-end appliances, but having a Sub-Zero refrigerator in and of itself, or a Viking stove or whatever, isn't going to necessarily get you into that demand category. What I think of is where the luxury buyer wants to buy.
Yeah.
When they come to Maine, a lot of times they're looking for a certain amount of privacy,
Yeah.
in addition to, having the home nicely furnished.
Yeah. Well, isn't it Maine where they say where they never tell people where things are? It's like you can't get there from here, you
I get
know.
there from here. One of the first things I learned about when I was in Maine.
That's why the population, I mean, aside from the cold, it's a beautiful outdoor, like so many states like Minnesota has all those beautiful lakes,
Yeah,
and some of the others. Um, but I think of Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire when you were talking about a beautiful, highly desirable
right.
lake that has high-end properties around it. New Hampshire doesn't have property tax, but it does have a view tax. So
Well,
if
they do
you
have property tax. They don't have income tax.
right, but they also have a view tax.
Yes.
So you have
Yeah.
your regular tax for your house, but if you have a view determined by, I guess, your town assessor or somebody,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that seems like a view, you get a more of a tax. Is that true
Yeah.
in Maine?
No, no. I don't. There might be some communities that do that in the southern part, but I'm not aware of any offhand that actually do that. They were referring to it as a glass tax. That, as far as, if you had so much window and
Windows.
view, right? But they've tried to do some things like that, but they haven't, as far as I know, they haven't gotten anything like that done. It might be a very local thing, but I don't see that.
Well,
The other
homeowner. I'm
I was
I'm
going to say
sorry.
the
Go
other
ahead.
thing that's different in Maine, and I get this question a lot when I have an out-of-state buyer. So the assessed values, the town assessments tend to be low. They're not necessarily right up to date. So, a buyer will come in and they'll see this just happened. It's a $3 million property that we have under contract. And one of the buyers came in from out of state and he's like, well, I don't know where you're coming up with this price because it's not assessed for that value and nothing in this town sells for that value. And then you have to kind of go through how, number one, our towns are so unique. Maine doesn't have really a lot of cookie cutter developments. So you can have a $3 million home next to a trailer. I mean, it can be that diverse.
Exactly.
But but the other thing is that the assessments don't necessarily keep up with the current value. So a lot of times the buyers will say, well, if I buy this at 3 million, are my taxes going to go up? And the answer is no. We're not like California or New York, where your selling price becomes the new assessed value. Now, eventually it'll catch up, but it kind of goes into the whole pot, and the whole algorithm gets developed, and it gets apportioned out between everything. So
yeah. The way I understand it across the country, from having spoken to a lot of people on this show, is that your assessed value is a percentage based on the price of whatever, how they've assessed it, but what the town needs to operate in a normal way.
right.
They don't want to overtax you, especially Maine. They just don't want to. And so
Right.
your assessment stays low. But there is always a relationship between assessed value and sale value. But you brought up a really good point about comps. So talk
Mm-hmm.
for a moment about how you actually comp and come up with a correct appraisal, because that neighborhood that property is living in, that double wide next to you, is nowhere near 2 million or 3 million.
Exactly. And so it is one of the more challenging things, dealing, obviously getting a property on the market,
Yeah.
to get a price point that will work.
Yeah.
And also working with buyers to have them feel comfortable that what they're paying is actually a reasonable amount.
Right.
I do want to preface it that, what everybody needs to remember is that an appraisal or a comp, or the appraisal, because that's the value. It's an opinion of value. And if you put three people in the room together, you're going to get three different opinions of what it's worth. But for me, and fortunately, I think most of the assessors in Maine are pretty good with this. They realize that we are a very diverse state. So instead of limiting the comps to a 1 mile radius or a 5 mile radius that they do in a lot more populated areas. So what I do is I will take a look at, all right, what are the features of this house? Is it oceanfront? How many square feet does it have? How many bedrooms does it have? What other characteristics? Does it have a deep water dock? That's worth a lot on the ocean. I take a look at all of those characteristics, and then I do a search to see what is like that across the state. I mean, I look at the whole state, because we don't have that many. We don't have that many $1 million. Even though we've doubled our sales, we're still looking at probably less than 1,000 sales in that category across the state. So when you start narrowing it down to oceanfront or whatever, you get your list narrowed down pretty fast. So I look across the state and I say, okay, here's a property in Kennebunk that's similar to this property out in Lubec. But Kennebunk is a much more desirable location in terms of pricing because it's so close to Boston. So I will typically do a location adjustment. And I'll say, well, properties in Lubec are going to sell for maybe 50% of the value that they would sell in Lubec.
Yeah.
And so we finesse it that way and say, okay, well, based on what we're seeing, this is the range of where I think the property will sell.
Right. I wanted to make one adjustment. You said that appraisals are what was the word you used? An evaluation or something?
Opinion of value.
Opinion, but it is a opinion that has to be it can be legally tested. So an appraiser has to do that. We agents, we say, well, the value is about this. It's like we will always want to get our.
It's squishy.
Yeah. But good agents, great agents, can always be within about 10% of what somebody's. And you're going to know when you begin your process, you're going to know probably who your buyer is and where your buyer is coming from.
Right.
What are your feeder neighbor? It's not a feeder neighborhood. It's like,
no.
Who are the wealthy people that are purchasing these homes?
So it depends on the location that you're in. So for example, if I'm looking at Camden, Maine, which is a very desirable town,
artsy.
We see a lot of people coming from the New York area, but also Texas.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people from Texas. In the Mid-Coast area in general, we'll see a lot of folks from my contractor just popped his head in. I have a lot of renovation going on. Um, so in the mid-coast area in general, we'll see people from, obviously Massachusetts. They want to be able to drive up, Massachusetts, New York, but we also see Virginia
Yeah.
and Maryland and that area. So the central, coast. I had one client who purchased a property in Blue Hill, and he's got multiple homes, but his summer home was in the Chesapeake region, Chesapeake Bay. And he just decided it was too hot in Chesapeake in July, so he needed to come further north. So he
There
bought
you
a
go.
house in Blue Hill for 3 or 4 weeks for the summer on the ocean.
Wow. Wow. Um, uh, you know this, but I just want to share this. We're from Massachusetts. My son lives in Manhattan, where he works. He was just married in Maine 2 weeks ago. So we had people from all over the country. It did flush some of the southern relatives because it was
Yeah.
2 weeks ago when it was -1 degree. But
Yep.
a beautiful, beautiful location right on the coast. We had, a big retreat house was where everything happened, but we had also rented a number of other properties that were also on that property.
Hmm.
It was great. Um, and being there with all of these people from all over the country, it was interesting to listen to them talk about the beauty of Maine and um,
Yeah.
and how it kind of astounded them. And then the good restaurants, the down home good food that you can get. Maine has a lot going for it.
Well, it's interesting. I think, Maine's always had a sort of cachet to it. It's kind of way out there. And I mean, I know when I was in high school, I remember looking at a map and seeing Maine and going, wow, that's so far away. Who'd ever want to go to Maine? And here I am. I've been living here for 40 plus years.
Yeah,
Um, but there is that certain appeal that a lot of people have. And, when I tell people I'm from Maine, the first is, oh my God, I've always wanted to go there, or I've been there and it's beautiful. So there is a lot of appeal. And I think with the pandemic, it's really um, energized the Maine market in that all of a sudden people are discovering, Maine as a place to go and have a certain amount of,
yeah,
freedom and a nicer lifestyle that you can afford. I mean, you can still get properties on the ocean, for under $3 million. And and depending on where you go, you can get them for under, 1 million to 2 million if you want to be far enough away, or, you can be out in the woods somewhere. So there's a lot of things that appeal to a lot of different people. Some
sure.
people want lakes, they want to be on a lake somewhere, or they want a snowmobile. So the pandemic has really, I think, done, I said it's elevated Maine's presence. But the other thing that it's done is I hear a lot of people say, I've always wanted to have a place in Maine. And I'm thinking, what am I waiting for? So that's contributed to also the sales. People are like, why am I putting this off? This is where
Yeah,
I want to be.
yeah,
I want to enjoy this. So
yeah, yeah. My son and his now wife, early to I love saying that, but um, they want to purchase they're 31, and
mhm,
they're doing well enough where they should be thinking about for a purchase.
yep.
Neither of them want to live in New York. They're both from the Massachusetts area. They're homers. They want to be back up in Massachusetts ultimately, but
Mhm.
what they do, they need to be in New York right at the time. So we've been talking to them about purchasing a first home in Maine and making it the place where we all hang out in the summers. And I'm sure that we could Airbnb it or something.
There's a
Um,
huge demand for Airbnb in
yeah,
Maine. If you're on the water in particular, and I
yeah,
don't care if it's lake or ocean,
yeah.
there's a huge demand. And, fortunately now you know an agent in Maine that can help you
I do. I
in your
do.
homeowner
Yeah.
search.
One of the reasons I do this show. And agents all over the place. Um, let's talk about not so much the buyers and what they're going to get, but you're also a really successful listing agent.
Yes.
So, what are the best practices for getting a luxury property on the market? What are some of the things that you do? Matterport, drones?
So for me, from my perspective, the most important thing to do getting a property on the market is the presentation portion. So I always do professional photography. And if I take a listing, and I don't care, like I've got a new listing coming on. It's only 425,000, but it's higher than the average price and
Right.
beautiful property. But professional photography is a must
Yeah.
because that's how people are going to view your home on the internet, and everybody starts shopping on the internet. So if you put terrible photos up, you're not going to get the interest. And clearly you don't want to, miss, advertise that the property is better than it is. You want to be realistic, but having a good quality professional photograph does wonders. Matterport is also a must because so many buyers are out of state.
Yeah.
And with the Matterport, they can do a virtual walkthrough of the house before they get there. I've had so many buyers tell me, oh yeah, we know all about this. We've looked at the Matterport 25 times. We just really want to see what's in that corner, and so they really become familiar with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Drone photography is also something that I do. I do have my own drone and license. So we make
Wow.
sure we get good aerials for that. And then the last item that I've done, and I've just started doing this probably about 6 months ago, there's another kind of tour with Rico, and it's similar to a Matterport, but the downside of a Matterport is you can't go outside. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's only internal. The
Yeah.
Rico camera allows me to do a virtual walkthrough or walk around the property. So
Yeah.
I can start at the driveway and they can see the street and we can walk down the driveway, and you don't have that 5 foot limitation that you do with Matterport. I could go 20 feet if that's the next
Yeah.
logical spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, somebody can walk around the property and see it before they set foot. And it saves the sellers a lot of time as well,
Yeah.
because we don't get a buyer coming in going, oh, well, I didn't know that was there. Or, if I had known this was there, I wouldn't have looked. So they get all of that up front. So the buyers that do come through are much more receptive to what the property has to offer. And we don't have to waste as much time with buyers who decide it doesn't fit.
Right. Right. Hey, we're almost up finished with our time here. I always like to end it by saying, "What haven't I asked you that I think is important for our audience to know?"
Ooh, that's a tough question. Well, I know you,
We've covered a lot.
I mean, I thought it was interesting with your opening is that not all agents are the same. And, one of the things that I would say, for buyers that are coming up to Maine, one of the things that I think differentiates me and my company, Harcourt's Waterfront and Fine Properties, is that we really understand the lifestyle of the different communities.
Yeah.
And, if you just contact an agent, they might know a town, but then if you don't want to be in that town,
Right.
if you don't know that you want to live in Camden and you don't care where else you go, it just has to be Camden, then it doesn't matter. But if you're kind of like, I'm really kind of looking for this property and I don't really know where I want to be, but I know I want to be
Yeah.
within so many miles of a store, and then you really need an agent or a company that understands more about the
Right.
lifestyle in the different communities, because there's some great homes, but do you want to be 3 hours away
Right.
from an airport?
Well,
And those are
the
questions.
airport was one of the things I was going to mention. If somebody's
Yep,
flying in for a vacation, they want to be able to take their plane in, if it's their plane,
yep,
or they want to be able to get there and not have to drive several hours from the
right.
airport to get to their home.
And we can tell you where, the local airports are and the runway sizes and,
Yeah.
but I said, that's kind of the thing that as we go through interviewing with the buyers in terms of trying to figure out what is it that they really want in terms of a lifestyle, because there's any number of homes or properties that could fit. But if you're going to be there and you're not going to be happy, it doesn't matter. You're going to want to leave if you don't like the lifestyle. So that's a really key thing for anybody who's considering moving to Maine, to think about, what do they really want their life to be when they get up here?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. Charlene Hamiwka. I said that right this time. Huh.
Yay! You get a gold star.
Yeah, Harcourt's fine properties. No,
Waterfront and
waterfront
fine,
properties and fine
waterfront
properties.
and fine properties, because that's what we cover.
I I had to get your name right first, but it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and thank you so much for sharing what it's like to be in Maine, and you can get there from here.
You can, and I'd be happy to meet you and show you how to do it.
I look forward. The next time we're up there, I'll stop in. Thanks so much,
Great.
Charlene. Real pleasure to have you.
Thanks, Larry. It was a pleasure to be on.
Join us next week for another exciting episode. And if you've really liked the show, subscribe and send us some questions. Or if you're interested in being on the show, reach out to me. Thanks so much, everyone.